Kong for the last generation.
On BetaMoto.com, the Republican candidate for governor.
Have sexual relations
and I realize that this is something he is
We're not going to
inherent.
be able to solve our problems if we get distracted by sideshows and carnival barkers.
One Republican, one Democrat, and you discuss the issues that matter in today's local, state, national, and global politics. Hosted by Steve Hickson with co-hosts John Stanberry and Franklin Chansey. This is Backfire.
Hey. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Backfire. Franklin and John Stanberry, good morning to you.
Hey, Steve.
Hey, it's been another good cold week, hasn't it?
It is. I don't think it's supposed to be above freezing for about another 48 hours.
You know, why couldn't Al Gore have been right about something at least once in his life?
Well, they're saying, I saw somebody talking about this last night, that all this is signs that it's true.
That global warming's true.
Yeah, that this is part of it. We've tilted the axle.
Well, now, actually, you want to talk about something scary, and this frustrates me that we talk about ridiculous stuff like global warming when it's fluctuations that have happened. You can go back and they take cores and they find that 50,000 years ago it was actually warmer before any big plants were around. But there is some serious stuff going on. We have the Hoover Dam. China has a convergence of 3 rivers over there, and they've built 3 dams on those 3 rivers. Each dam is larger than the Hoover Dam. The 3 dams have literally collected enough water that they are tipping the rotational axis of the Earth. Now, you think about that for a minute. We're worried about global warming, something we can't really prove, but we now have China has literally collected enough water in one place to actually shift the center of gravity of the Earth's axis, and we're not talking about that. That actually scares me. I mean, when you talk about what could have potentially devastating consequences, I would think shifting the axis of the Earth could be kind of bad.
You think
Franklin's Googling it.
You think they can drink that water?
That's not a political thing, Franklin. That was like a National Geographic thing.
No, I'm looking it up. I've never heard about this.
Well, it's kind of scary if you think about it.
You think they can drink that water?
BusinessInsider.com says that this is a internet myth.
Well, it was a National Geographic story on the dam.
Well, maybe so.
The
That it's moving the axis of the Earth.
Well, I mean,
it says is a myth.
Well, I think global warming's a myth. So we're fair. We're even.
I mean, you got to imagine.
Most scientists don't, but you know.
Most scientists actually do. Most climatologists don't agree with global warming.
Most
scientists
do
who
not.
don't have any actual education in climatology agree with you.
Most scientists overwhelmingly agree that
Franklin,
the Earth is getting warmer.
I hate to break this to you, but in about 4 years ago, the New York Times ran an ad signed by 700 world scientists claiming global warming was correct. Now, most of them were not climatologists. So in response, an ad was placed with 7,000 scientists, the bulk of which were climatologists, who said that they didn't think it was man-made and that it was simple fluctuations, and the New York Times refused to run the ad.
What you are is a victim of the tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars being pumped into the anti-warming crusade by industry. And that's
Franklin,
exactly what's happening.
What about the tens of millions of dollars that are pumped into the...
It's not even a fraction of that.
Franklin, the warming people get the same money from government grant. If you get a grant for a 5-year study to study warming, and the first year you find out there's no
John,
warming,
your
money goes
aren't
away.
you?
Yeah, I'm an outdoorsman.
Okay. Well, then you already know then that plants and animals and so forth habitats are changing dramatically
Franklin,
over the last 15
explain to me
to 20
how
years.
the researchers
you know
at the North Pole who got trapped in the ice, who were there to research the lack of ice. Explain to me how Al Gore's Academy Award-winning movie said that by 2013, that would be last year, the poles would be completely devoid of ice. Tell me how that's right.
He did not say that,
He did.
Don.
He said by 2013, there would be no ice at the North Pole.
We got a lot to talk about this morning. Let's just not get off on all this. In fact, I can prove that Franklin's right. Things are changing because we found an armadillo here in Cleveland, Tennessee. They keep coming this way.
Yeah.
The animals are moving. Anyway, I just last night I heard them talking about $100 million was spent on this global warming stuff that basically They haven't proven anything, and that they keep spending money. And no matter how much money we spend in America, China is going to break down everything we try to do.
We're going to get rid of coal in America, but we're going to ship the coal to China, who burns it much dirtier. Oh, by the way, that's another great one. There was a story in the Free Press this past weekend. The EPA's guidelines for scrubbing the air emissions of coal plants has now contributed to significant water contamination. So the EPA's rules that they forced the coal companies to abide by to supposedly scrub the air has now made significant pollution in the water. And now the EPA is going after the coal company and saying, oh, you're bad, you're contaminating the water. They're contaminating the water because the EPA made them do it.
Are you talking about the spill in West Virginia?
No, it's not the spill. It's the scrubbers. The scrubbers that several years ago the EPA regulated the industry into putting on their smokestacks. That ends up going into the ground. Most of it's stored in the ground, and it's ending up contaminating groundwater. So the EPA rules, as usual, unintended consequences of an overactive government is now contaminating the water. But of course, the EPA is not taking the blame for it. They're turning right back around and blaming the coal companies.
Oh, well.
Ronald Reagan, government's not the answer. Government is the problem.
I see where SunTrust is closing their downtown branch.
That's correct.
Saw that.
That's a large modern large modern building that was built later in life downtown, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of out of place when they first built it.
Yeah. Merchants Bank built it originally.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Of course, the DA's office is there too. What does that mean? That the lease will just be taken over by whoever buys it?
Yeah, they're negotiating.
That's up to
sales
the buyer.
Yeah.
I would think that'd be up to
most
the buyer.
buyers like
a lease.
So.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I hate to see that going. Hope someone can take that building and utilize it for the best uses for downtown Cleveland. The state of the city was blessed by Mayor Tom Rowland, and he also stated that he was going to seek one more term. Mayor Rowland's been in the office here for a long time. Of course, we've seen many changes, and the mayor gives an annual State of the City address each year to the Kiwanis Club, I believe, isn't it? I believe that's correct.
Kiwanis or Rotary?
It's not the Rotary.
No. Must be the Kiwanis Club then.
All right. Anyway, he had a lot of good things to say. I was reading a really interesting article, and I wanted to bring it up this morning and talk about it a little bit. And believe it or not, it was in Franklin's favorite magazine, Time Magazine. I keep getting those things now, and this was on the marijuana industry. And I didn't realize, but they don't have any way to bank money. They've got legalized marijuana, but they have no place to put their money. And the federal law, after reading this, the federal law prevents banks from transacting with businesses connected to a so-called Schedule I drug. And anyway, even with the medical marijuana, they haven't been able to utilize the banking system. And you think about it, when you've got this kind of cash coming in, you can't utilize a banking system. You've got employees you've got to pay. You've got things you've got to do, bills to pay, and you're having to deal with mounds of cash. It's they've had several big crime deals going on.
Not surprised.
Yeah, they've had one group that was kidnapped an owner of a dispensary in Orange County, according to court documents, and the settlers zip-tied the victim, tortured him, and drove him to a patch of desert where they believe he had buried large sums of money. When the kidnappers couldn't find it, they allegedly burned him with a blowtorch, cut off his penis, and doused him with bleach before dumping him along the side of the road. He survived.
Wasn't one of the arguments of legalizing marijuana is that it would reduce crime?
Well, and that went on in this article. They're saying under the standards that they're having to deal with, this was passed to be something as a test mode, and now they've got something to make it illegal. I mean, by putting money in the bank, and they're creating crime. They're creating crime by not being able to put the money in the banks.
Well, first of all, these statutes have been on the books for 30 or 40 years. This is not something that's just been passed. The conflict is being caused by these rapid changes in the way people think about this. So you have one
or don't think.
Well, okay. I'm not taking a position on that, but as a practical matter, we can't. You don't change federal law every time one state does something, and that's where we are right now.
Yeah, but you have an administration that's basically encouraging this on the state level. If they had any backbone, they'd just go ahead and say, okay, fine, we're going to propose changing it federally. That's a real problem, Franklin. We've talked about this on other issues. Government should not be in the business of picking and choosing when they enforce a law and when they don't enforce a law. And this president is very comfortable in a dictatorial manner of deciding when he prosecutes and when he doesn't.
It's not a question of picking and choosing.
Franklin, in the Defense of Marriage Act, this attorney general said, we've decided unilaterally, even though this was a duly elected law signed into law by Bill Clinton, we're not going to enforce it anymore. This administration has a history of that, and that's part of the problem here. On top of the fact that the people are being incredibly stupid for legalizing marijuana in the first place.
The state, I guess it's Colorado, they're talking about.
Well, and I think Washington State is
Washington State's coming next, isn't it?
In about 3 or 4 months.
Well, there's several. I've got some more stuff to talk about, but several. The state is projected to take in $67 million in marijuana taxes in 2014.
See, Franklin, that ought to bother the liberals. The real push for this on the state levels, when you talk about the state governments, is money. That's what they're after, is tax money.
I'm not sure that I agree with that, John. Whether you and I agree with it or not, it's really irrelevant. The fact is that this is an issue like gay marriage, where on a generational level, there's a different view about it.
Well, you might
and if you look at all the polls for people who are under 40, there's a majority of those people who think that this should not be illegal.
Now, are those the same under 40s that are doing the truth.com ads where they're vilifying the legal tobacco companies? Those same people? They're smart enough to say tobacco's bad for you, but they're dumb enough to turn around and say, hey, let's legalize marijuana?
Well, I haven't heard anybody say that tobacco should be made illegal.
Franklin, we're
trying to dissuade people, and we ought to try to dissuade them from smoking marijuana, too.
Our wonderful Health and Human Services Secretary had a press conference on Friday. It was about an 8,500-word press conference where she extolled the horrible things about tobacco, how terrible it was, how we had to rid the country of it. At the same time, the same administration is saying, we're okay with legalizing marijuana. And if you want to talk...
That's not what they said.
It's exactly what they said, Franklin. They said, hey, states, we're not going to enforce federal law. Go ahead and legalize it.
They did not say we're not going to enforce federal law.
Did they not
They said they were not going to prioritize that, which is what people do all the time.
Prioritize. So we have a law on the book, but we're just going to look the other way.
Well, that's the problem, John. We have big problems. We have medium-sized problems. We have small problems. Do we take our limited resources that you're always talking about, and do we focus on the big problems or the little ones?
Well, frankly, I'm glad you brought that
up.
Casual
Casual use of marijuana falls into the little problems.
Really? So Kathleen Sebelius thought that a full press conference on a legal product, cigarettes, was a priority, but saying anything about an illegal drug was not a priority. I mean, you talk about priorities,
Kathleen
Franklin.
Sebelius isn't the one who enforces the laws.
You're missing the point. She is a representative of this administration, and they thought it was important to devote time and resources to vilifying a legal product, but they don't vilify an illegal. But they don't think it's. You just said it wasn't important. It wasn't a priority to vilify an illegal product. Which, by the way, you want to talk about it, look at Denmark. Denmark legalized it. Guess what's happening in Denmark? Right now, the crime surrounding their legal pot areas is increasing. They're now, Amsterdam is the first.
It's been legal there for 50
You're right.
years.
And what they found is the crime has increased around the pot centers. So instead of decreasing crime, it's actually increased it. And now they're finding that their kids are coming to school stoned. And so Amsterdam is now the first town in Denmark that is now trying to keep it out of the schools. They're not going to allow the kids to do it anymore. By the way, did you know that regular marijuana uses actually peels off points off your IQ?
Nobody's touting the benefits
You're
of
missing the
smoking
point,
marijuana.
Franklin. You don't
John.
think it's important. This administration doesn't think it's an important battle to fight. That's my point. We're fighting a battle against cigarettes, which are a legal product. Now, don't get me wrong, we screwed up when they were legalized. And they've been legal for, I guess, hundreds of years.
$67 million in marijuana taxes in one state to be raised, and the
That's
first
what
$40
this is
million,
about.
the first $40 million raised from the excise tax on pot sales is earmarked for school construction.
Well, isn't that great? Let's sell pot to the kids so that they can lower their IQs, and then let's use the money we get for them to build better schools. Why don't we just shoot ourselves?
But it's amazing to me that there are going to be cowboys and Indians back out here trying to guard the money. I mean, the business is in place. People are in line to do it, to get it. They're spending money hands over fist, but they can't put their money anywhere.
Well, did you know that marijuana smoke is actually significantly more carcinogenic than tobacco smoke? So we've got all this emphasis on trying to decrease smoking tobacco, but we're actually going to allow this kind of foolishness to go on.
And I'm going to read another poll. The Gallup poll found that 58% of Americans favor legalization.
Of course they do, because we're a lazy, ignorant population who doesn't think beyond the end of our nose. How can those same people, if you did a survey of those same people, they'll tell you how bad tobacco smoking is, but they're going to turn around and say, oh, but I'm okay with marijuana smoking.
I haven't heard anybody say that it's good for you or that they're
If
for it.
it's not good for you, why would 50-something% be for legalizing
The question is whether or not it should be criminalized. That's the issue.
Fine, Franklin.
There's tons
You're
of
right,
things
and
that
we're
are
gonna
not
do
good.
the same argument.
Bacon's not good for you.
We're going to do the same argument, Franklin, that we do on homosexuality. Once you legalize this, what about the group that says, hey, I drop a little acid every now and then. I don't hurt anybody. Why should I be criminalized? Hey, I take a little LSD every now and then. I take some barbiturates. You know what? Speed keeps me going, makes me work harder. Why is that criminalized?
There are a lot of people, particularly in libertarian groups, who would agree with that argument.
Once again, Franklin, you might want to go over to Europe and see the countries where they have legalized it and the problems that they're now encountering. They're all backing off of it. Once again, I'll go back to Denmark. Denmark is quickly backing off of all these legalized drugs because they've seen tremendous problems. They've seen people in their societies whose lives are completely destroyed by the addiction that it brings on.
States that are likely to be next, John: Oregon, Arizona, California,
Florida,
Alaska, Rhode Island.
It's already been partially legal in Alaska for about 30 years, actually.
It's partially legal?
Yeah, it's
How
legal.
do you have partially legal?
It's legal in Alaska to possess a misdemeanor amount of marijuana. It's not legal to sell it.
Mm-hmm.
Go figure. But that's been the law there for 30, 40 years.
So they can grow it?
You know,
No. They just made a decision. They
How do you own it if
They
you
just
can't
made it.
buy it?
No, this is kind of what we were talking about. They just made a decision that they weren't going to invest their resources in trying to prosecute people for possessing small amounts of marijuana. That's what they did.
A recent Northwestern University study found that marijuana users have abnormal brain structure, poor memory, and that chronic marijuana abuse leads to brain changes resembling schizophrenia. But by all means, let's encourage this.
Well, I thought this article was really interesting, and I read it in Franklin's favorite magazine, Time Magazine. Do you not get time?
I don't get time, actually.
Okay.
Well,
I'll start giving you mine.
Okay.
Somehow I get them now.
A study of postal workers found that employees who tested positive for marijuana had 55% more accidents, 85% more injuries, and a 75% increase in being absent from work. In Australia, a study found that cannabis intoxication was responsible for 4.3% of driver fatalities. But by all means, I'm so happy the president has decided this is not a priority.
Well, John, here's the way I look at it. If they want to smoke pot, let them smoke pot, because right now in California, they're going to let the boys and the girls pee in the same bathroom.
Yeah, but here's the point. I'm okay. Here's what happens with all of these things. The good liberals force these things on us, and they talk us into going, oh, it's no big deal. If they want to do it, let them do it. But then when these dummies end up unemployed, I'm supposed to provide a lifetime income for them.
Ultra-conservative libertarians are behind this more than the liberals.
Franklin? I'm against it, whether it's the libertarians that are for it or whether it's the liberals that are for it. My point is, I would be a libertarian if we could be completely libertarian about it. You want to ruin your life on marijuana, fine, but don't ask me to support you for the rest of your life while you lay around and eat cookies. It's not my responsibility to pay for your bad decisions.
Now, wait a minute, John. If they laid around and ate cookies, that'd probably help your business.
Well, as long as they buy their own cookies. I don't care. I just don't want to buy their cookies.
They're going to have cavities.
Well, then they won't have any money to pay for that either because they can't keep a job on marijuana.
They might be a marijuana tycoon. Anyway. Got John going early this morning.
Well, it just frustrates me that we do one thing without thinking any further down the road than the end of our nose. It will devastate people's lives, and it is disgusting, and Franklin ought to be disgusted, whether he admits it or not. There are tons of these state governments that are simply looking at the tax dollars.
Here's what I think, John. I see no evidence to support the suggestion that what we're doing now is reducing marijuana smoking. What it is doing is creating a class of criminals from people who are doing nothing but.
Franklin, you actually mean to tell me that there are not kids in our high schools, our colleges, that don't do it because they don't want to take a chance on ruining their careers?
I would say that there are increasingly few who are motivated.
So by all means, let's encourage that. Let's make it even easier. Let's make it even easier to screw up your life.
What I think, John, is that there are lots of people who make bad decisions. And in this particular case, the question is, in the legitimate debate, is whether the criminalization of the conduct creates more of a downside for these folks than the opposite.
Fundamentally, here's the problem with that. If you're wrong, we can't repair the damage from your mistake. Because if you're wrong and more people, actually Denmark found that out. They legalized it and more people went into it. They had more addicts. They had more people laying around completely unproductive with destroyed lives. Ask Dr. Drew. Dr. Drew's treated these people for decades, and he will tell you, the high eventually wears off and they start smoking more and more. They become less productive and they can't live their lives. But by all means, let's vilify tobacco, which is a legal product, at the same time we encourage more use of an illegal product. That makes a lot of sense.
Changing the subject. As of January 1st, students in California public schools have been able to choose whether to use the boys' restroom or the girls' restroom, as well as the girls' locker rooms or the boys' locker rooms.
On a day-to-day basis, they can change their mind.
Based on whether they feel female or male, not whether they are tonically female or male.
The good Democratic supermajority in the California legislature passed that, and the good Democratic governor, Jerry Brown, signed it into law. So if your son decides that he's a girl tomorrow, he can go in the girls' locker room and shower with the girls. But if the next day he's seen all the girls he wants to see, he can say, today I'm a guy, and he can go back in the guys' locker room.
That wouldn't have worked during my time.
Well, it worked fine, depending on what you wanted out of it.
Well, you know,
I know exactly what you and I would have wanted out of it.
I'd gone over and visited the girls' locker room every now and then.
I mean, this is just ridiculous. This is liberal ridiculousness.
It is. It's amazing to me that I mean, this is
by
from
the way,
kindergarten age up.
Is anybody concerned about the rights of the people that aren't doing that? What about your daughter that's in that locker room? She's not going to pull this trick. She's not going to say, "Oh, I feel like a boy today because I want to go look at the naked boys." But what about the boy who comes in the locker room and looks at her? What about her rights? She doesn't have a right to be protected from someone, lewdly staring at her simply because a bunch of ignorant liberals in the legislature legalized this?
I mean, it's amazing, really. I just don't see how something like this could get this far where they actually signed it in. I mean, this is kindergarten.
Jerry Brown signed it.
I mean, what's the man thinking?
They're not thinking. I mean, this is part of the, these are leftover hippies from the 70s. Do whatever you want, free love, have whatever you want to have, say whatever you want to say, and there should be, partly the argument we just had about marijuana, there should be no restrictions on what you want to do.
Franklin's awful quiet this morning. Isn't he?
I'm looking up this. You guys find these stories that I've never heard about.
Well, Franklin, it's been all over the news.
I haven't seen that.
It was on NPR yesterday. Not a liberal, organization. And to be perfectly honest, on this radio show, I brought it up about 3 or 4 months ago when it first passed. Because we wouldn't want anyone to feel pressured into the, genetic sex that they're born with.
It's pretty amazing to me that. What about
We've got a condemned killer now that the federal government, the courts are forcing the taxpayers to pay for his sex change operation.
I saw that last night also. I mean, that's unbelievable to me that you've got a convicted killer.
Never going to get out.
Never
no
going to
parole.
get out. That we're going to pay
I don't know what that
millions
costs.
of dollars for, I think, to have him converted to a female from a male.
You've already been paying for his hormones and his psychotherapy.
Well, are we going to move him to a female prison?
Well, actually, that's a problem for the prison. The warden said that. He said, I have a real problem is how am I going to protect him once the sex change, because he's still classified as a man.
Right. Franklin's real quiet this morning.
Your buddies in the liberal...
Some judge has ruled that they have to do that. I imagine it'll be appealed, is my guess.
Let's talk about something I know
Was the
everybody's
judge a
heard.
moron or not? I mean, how ignorant and disconnected from just basic common sense do you have to be to rule that way?
I'm sure he was following the letter of the law, right?
No,
Franklin?
I'm sure he was following his liberal beliefs. That's an activist ruling.
Hey, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson. We'll be right back after this.
You are listening to